Welcome to Psychopath in Your Life. This is episode number 32. I'm your host, Diane Emerson. I'm the author of the book Psychopaths in Our Lives, My Interviews, which is now available on Amazon and iBooks. The only place you can get the paperback is through Amazon. But anyway, so let's get started. Today I'd like to talk about sex and psychopaths. While I was writing my book, one of the areas I didn't cover in my questions had to do with sex. Well, one of the guys talked about sex, so you will find some sex stuff in there, and it's kind of affirming. But anyway, so why not, might you ask? Why didn't I ask these people more about sex? Well, once I figured out that they only had a glimmer of an idea about what their eyes look like and other things based on what they were told by victims, I decided that I would rather rely on what victims had to say about sex and what it was like with the psychopath in their lives. Sex is all in the news here in the U.S. this last month. Powerful people, from politicians to entertainment, head guys, and even hotel workers, they're not getting as much coverage, but the abuse spans over many levels of victims. We even have a current president here in the U.S. who was caught making ugly, derogatory, extremely crude sexual comments on tape about the abuse of women. But I'll leave that one alone because this podcast isn't about politics, and to me that would be a third rail here. But I'm just making that as a statement about how prolific all of this sexual stuff and how it's all starting to, the lid's popping off, okay? And it's always been my opinion that it's not about the sex, but the control and domination and humiliation. Now it seems like on the news, we're even splitting hairs over which one is worse. They're all horrible. It's gone from, there was a comedian here in the U.S. Al Franken, who is now a sitting U.S. senator, was caught on camera. He was off at a UFO tour, and the woman who was part of the tour, and then the skits and whatnot, there was a picture of her in her flak suit or whatever helmet, asleep on a plane, and he was hanging over her, cusping both of her breasts and turning around and smiling for the camera. Well, I don't know about you, but this is the level of splitting hairs we're getting to, okay? This guy is my age. I'm 66. This picture was only a few years ago. So I'm really not sure on what level how you could ever turn that into, I was just joking. Sex is not a joke when it comes to unwanted sexual advances. So now, and part of it, you'll kind of hear it in my voice, I'm pretty disgusted. Not pretty, like way disgusted. But, on the other hand, I'm glad this is coming out. I've thought these thoughts for a million years now, and I'm glad that we're getting some context to it. And I won't diagnose any of them as such, because my role here on this podcast is to talk about the why and hows that you can't find on a checklist. I have my own feelings about what they are. But for my own reasons, let's just talk about what the victims had to say over the years. And it's interesting because I was doing some research at my forum to pull together some comments for this podcast, and it's amazing because I can remember over the years everybody who crossed that door, and I still to this day, all I do is say a little prayer, and I hope that they found the best that they could for their life. But there was one comment by a victim that stood out to me all these years, and it went like this: I felt like he was using my body to masturbate. Also, lots of comments about no eye contact during sex, and tons of observations on my forum from victims of actual psychopaths about their sex life with them. Too many to really ignore. So I would encourage you to go to psychopath-research.com, because there's over 140 comments on the thread about psychopaths and sex. I put the direct link below. But anyway, so here's some direct thoughts from the victims. I had thought about hiring an actor to do some of these when they're talking in the victim voice, but it's really not something that I can really do. It's just me and the microphone and the audio guy and my 2 dogs and a cat. So anyway, here, let me get into this, and what I'll be doing is reading to you from some thoughts that were written over sex and psychopaths. Okay, here we go. What made it so hard is that I bought into the lie so completely because the sex was great in the beginning. With what I believed, and since overall it was so good, there had to be some love, some loyalty, something of value in our relationship. It couldn't possibly be all bad, right? Wrong. He was incapable of loyalty. That simple fact turned all the rest, anything that appeared to be good or true, into mud. He could get out of bed, walk 3 steps, and betray me without a second thought, and then lie about it. And he did. A red flag that comes to mind that occurred that I ignored during our intimate times. Slowly over time, I was not allowed to face him anymore. I had to be face down during sex. If on the rare times I did get to face him, he always stared straight ahead at the wall or covered my face with a piece of clothing. The kissing, hugging, and foreplay no longer existed either. For the psychopath, sex is a stimulating obsession with him. Women in his life are just for the amusement and pleasure. The sex at first is all-consuming and very passionate. Later on, he seemed to have gotten bored, like the thrill is in the getting and on the other next victim that he wants to get. He cannot contain the beast in him, or most likely a little both. In the beginning, though, while he is wooing you and the sex is great, he is still out there looking for his next victim, in the bars, on adult personal sites, or in chat rooms, and all the while he's creating the persona of Prince Charming. At first I thought I wasn't pretty enough or perfect enough for him, but then, with the help of this forum, I now believe it isn't about me. It is about him. His wife can't satisfy him, nor I couldn't satisfy him, nor can any single woman can. A bottomless pit of a sexual pervert always on the prowl for the next one. So the more women know that he's out there, they can save themselves the emotional toll it has taken on his previous victims. Everything was about sex to my psychopath. Any issue over which I struggled for some control was about sex to him. He told me in later years that he really viewed me as always attempting to control him. In his twisted view, if I squirmed for any control over my own life, I was controlling him. I understand now that the psychopath believes he has the right to control everyone, and when his victim attempts to gain any control over her own life, she is wresting that control away from him. She has no rights. She does not actually exist in his view. She is an extension of him. I believe that for psychopaths, sex and control are all bound up together. Psychopaths use sex from the beginning to take away my autonomy. He violated me sexually by having sex with all my friends, neighbors, associates, so that I could not turn anywhere without being confronted by the sickening awareness of my psychopath's sexual betrayals. He had sex with other women in my bed. He humiliated me in all social settings by having sexually charged conversations with other women in my presence, often stranding me somewhere while he disappeared for hours with one of these women. I did not have a jealous or suspicious bone in my body when I first met this psychopath. But, of course, I developed those traits. In actuality, it took a long time and tremendous effort on the psychopath's part. I did not understand that behavior because it ran contrary to the wisdom of my heart. I remained innocent for a ridiculously long time. When Psychopath was setting me up to become his invention, he constantly planted the concept in my mind and the minds of all observers that our problems were the result of my irrational jealousy and suspicion. This worked perfectly. In later years, when he had perfected his act so that he did not behave in obvious ways in front of others, but seduced women by pretending to be suffering from my irrational jealousy and control of him. Psychopath turned every issue in later years into one about sex and my mental sickness about it. It did not matter if we agreed over who was to get the water softener salt. The psychopath would turn the argument into one about my torture of him over sexual issues. When we went through a horrible time while he was working for a mental health agency, a problem-ridden time which had nothing to do with sex, he was befriended by 2 female therapists on the staff. I asked him how he characterized our problems to them. He said, "I told them I have made a few mistakes years ago and that you have never been able to let it go." Psychopath was the sole creator of this fiction. No matter how hard I tried to stay away from the subject, he invariably brought it up within seconds of any conflict. "Now, you're not going to start telling me how I slept with all your friends. I can't take it anymore. I might just have to kill myself." This speaks of 2 things to me, and I'm still talking in the victim's voice. One is that Psychopath constructed a reality in which he tortured me sexually while creating an illusion of the opposite, that I tortured him sexually. The other is that sex was his ultimate soul-destroying weapon. I have read that sexual abuse is absolutely the most damaging because it destroys the soul of the victim. This makes sense because when you think of sex as an expression of love, in order for it to work, the person who loves has to surrender their being, their separateness for a moment, and allow herself to fall backward over something that feels like a waterfall. She has to relinquish control and abandon her boundaries. This can be a spiritual experience and its truest form expression. It is a spiritual experience. Thus, sex can be a vehicle of ultimate healing power or a vehicle of ultimate destructive power. It is a question of who and why is in control in the moment that the woman, in this case, relinquishes control. I have no doubt that the psychopath recognizes that exploitative potential of sex as a weapon to destroy at the deepest level. Mine used it to breathtaking perfection. Sometimes when we were not being sexual, I talked to my psychopath about my problem about our sexual life, very gently, hoping we could work on solving it together. Psychopath's most usual reaction was extreme self-pity. "Wow, that really hurts me to know that something that is so special to me actually hurts you. I don't know if I can get past that. Poor thing to be so burdened by my problems." Psychopaths are able to cause almost limitless destruction to his victim, to her soul, to take her soul to hell repeatedly through the weapon of sexual torture. And all the while he is doing it, he paints her as his abuser. She is always hurting him, not the other way around. The psychopath has all the exits covered. I never viewed the open flirtation with other women in my presence as humiliating. I was hurt by it, but stuffed the pain, anger, and just felt miserable about it. Now I realize that the hurt I felt was the pain of humiliation. This was one of the most difficulties of his betrayals for me. It was when the relationship, if what he said was true, was totally perfect in every way, it was when I should have walked and didn't. I guess the writing was on all the walls back then, and I chose to ignore it and to believe his words instead. One of my friends tried to tell me, and I was so twisted by then that I thought she wanted him for herself. Duh, maybe she did, but it still would have been her loss and my gain to get rid of him. Anyway, I've never felt such pain as with that first betrayal, and some others that happened in the first 18 months. And I spent so much time trying to change myself so that he would become faithful. What a sick situation. Looking back, everything after his first 18 months was like rolling downhill without brakes on. And I was in such a confused, hurting state all the time that I was almost numb to what happened later on. The psychopath is a vessel of hate masquerading as a vessel of love. Sex to him is a weapon of destruction, a hateful act, a meaning of penetrating to the victim's innermost being and doing violence to her soul. Well, that about says it all up. The only difference, this is about sex with psychopaths in a relationship. What's going on now in all these people that are getting exposed, finally, for their deviant behavior, is that, they're not in a relationship, but the relationship is they have some power. So if I want to do something to you, you better make sure that you don't talk about it because I will ruin you. So if you're an actress and you don't go along with me, I will make sure that you never work again. And they're doing truly bizarre things like exposing themselves to women, masturbating in front of them. I mean, it gets pretty sick. But anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of finding that I'm glad it's all coming out now, but I'm disgusted. So anyway, on the closing comments I'd like to make, last week I listened to the best podcast ever about a psychopath. Listen to it yourself to see how even women with what appears to have everything going on in their lives can fall victim to a terrible psychopath. I never saw the ending coming, and frankly, I did binge watch. I probably should have been doing a little dusting or something, but I couldn't stop listening to the show. Truly chilling. The name of the podcast is Dirty John. There's a link below, and you could also find it on iTunes. So anyways, I do apologize today. I'm stumbling around a little bit because I had a pretty serious injury last week, so it's okay. I'll live, but it's... my concentration is just a little bit off, but with me, it's just me. So, here we are. I'm hoping that you appreciate the information, and I would really like it if you would subscribe to the podcast and share it on social media. I really need that social media help because we really need to get the word out to these women who are living in isolation, fear, and feeling like they did something wrong. Let's all try to work together to help them out. So you can also find this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Facebook, and YouTube. And you can go to the website, psychopathinyourlife.com, same name as the podcast, and there's an audio box so you can listen to the show directly. Also, at the website, I have a direct email link that you're welcome to use, and that's Diane, Dianne, at Diane Emerson, DianneEmerson.com. Or at the website for your privacy, there's a box there where you can send an email, which will come to my email box, where you don't have to use your email address or anything for your privacy. And one thing you will learn about me over time is that I take privacy extraordinarily. It's probably the most important thing in our relationship is that I really respect your privacy. So anyway, that will be it for now until next Tuesday. And just keep in mind that change begins one breath at a time. Talk to you later and see you then. Goodbye for now.